"Don't look there," said the Apache woman. But the rancher kept looking, and did something that enraged her. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky, its harsh rays scorching the earth below. The endless stretch of desert seemed to hold its breath, a place where time slowed to a crawl. There was no wind, no sound, except for the occasional, soft whisper of a dry blade of grass, swaying in the vast emptiness. In this barren stretch of land, two figures stood at odds, each caught in the tension of the moment. The Apache woman, bound by strong, coarse ropes to a makeshift wooden structure, was a symbol of strength and defiance. Her body was bent in a way that suggested both submission and resistance, a position of restraint that couldn't hide the fierceness in her eyes. She was tall and wiry, her long black hair cascading like a river of ink around her shoulders. The intricate beads and fringes of her short leather dress swayed ever so slightly, a testament to the richness of her culture, even in the midst of this desperate situation. Her sharp, dark eyes glared at the man standing in front of her. His presence was like a storm, a silent one, oppressive and unyielding. The rancher, a rugged man dressed in typical frontier clothing, a cowboy hat, worn shirt, and brown boots, stood in a posture of both curiosity and defiance. He had his hand on the rope that held her, his fingers gripping it tightly, as if trying to make sense of the situation unfolding before him. "Don't look there," the Apache woman hissed through gritted teeth. Her voice filled with warning and anger. Her eyes were locked onto something in the distance, something that troubled her deeply. It was a strange, almost forbidden glance, as if she feared what would happen if the rancher dared to follow her gaze. But despite the warning, the rancher's curiosity was piqued, and his eyes slowly moved to the spot she had indicated. His gaze followed, and there, in the far distance, a dark shadow moved on the horizon, its form barely distinguishable against the backdrop of the desert. She noticed his eyes shift, and her heart sank. "I told you not to look," she spat, struggling against the ropes that held her. But the more she fought, the tighter they became. Her breath was shallow, a mixture of rage and fear. Fear not of the rancher, but of something else. The rancher's eyes, however, were now fixed on the silhouette, unaware of the growing anger in the woman's chest. He took a cautious step towards the structure that held her in place, his boots crunching softly on the dry earth. His hand relaxed around the rope, and he looked at the Apache woman with a strange mixture of pity and fascination.
"What is it you see?"
he asked, his voice low and steady, as if trying to understand the world through her eyes. The Apache woman's face twisted with a complex emotion. Betrayal, pride, and a sense of helplessness all rolled into one. She knew what he had seen, and now she knew there was no turning back. The man, despite the warning, had followed her gaze. It was more than a simple glance. It was an act of curiosity that defied the boundaries of trust. She had hoped to protect him from what was coming, but it was too late. "You shouldn't have looked," she whispered, her voice a mix of sadness and anger. "Now you'll never understand." The rancher, perplexed, took another step closer to her. "Understand what? What are you afraid of?" The Apache woman's gaze hardened. "That thing you just saw," she said, her voice cold and deliberate. "It isn't just the land that's haunted. It's the history of this place. The things that have been buried for generations. It's why we remain here, hidden, and why we fight to protect what's left." The rancher was silent for a moment, his mind racing to grasp the meaning of her words. He had heard stories, of course, about the land, the violence, the wars, the bloodshed, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of the woman's words. He was a man of logic, of reason, not superstition. He had lived his whole life on these plains, working the land, taming it, and building his life on the back of the cattle he raised. But here, in the presence of the Apache woman, those hard-earned beliefs seemed fragile, like glass ready to shatter. "I'm just trying to help you," the rancher muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "You don't have to be like this. You don't have to resist." The woman let out a bitter laugh, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "Help me?" she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "You think you can help me? You don't even understand what you've just done. You've unleashed something that should have stayed buried." The rancher's brows furrowed, and he stepped back slightly. "What do you mean by that? What's coming?" For a moment, the Apache woman fell silent. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of her breath, each inhale filled with a deep, unsettling sorrow. She turned her head slightly to the side, her face now obscured by shadows, as if the very thought of what she was about to say was too heavy to bear. "I didn't want you to see it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now you have, and there's no going back." Her words echoed in the stillness of the desert, and the rancher, despite his confusion, felt a chill settle in his bones. He had crossed a line, and now there would be consequences. The shadow he had seen in the distance was not just a person or an animal. It was something far older, far more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. And in that moment, the truth began to dawn on him. This land, this woman, and the stories she held were far deeper and darker than he had ever known. The wind had picked up, though it was no longer the soft desert breeze that gently stirred the dust. No, this was something different, something heavier, as though the earth itself had begun to stir beneath their feet. The rancher's gaze flickered nervously from the Apache woman to the horizon, where the shadow he had seen earlier was now moving, its form more distinct with each passing second. The Apache woman, still tied to the post, remained eerily still. Her eyes were closed now, as though she were preparing herself for something inevitable. Her lips parted slightly, barely moving as she whispered an ancient chant under her breath. The rancher could not make out the words, but he could feel the weight of them pressing against his chest, as though the very air around them had thickened. "What's happening?" the rancher asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His tone was tinged with desperation now, as though he was grasping at straws, hoping that the woman might offer an explanation he could understand. But she only shook her head slightly, her hair falling around her face like a dark curtain, hiding her features. "I warned you," she replied, her voice quiet but laced with a sharpness that seemed to cut through the air. "You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" The rancher's stomach twisted in a knot, and a sense of dread began to settle over him. He was a man used to controlling situations, used to having a handle on everything around him. But this was different. He felt as if the very earth was conspiring against him, pushing him toward an outcome he didn't understand and certainly couldn't escape. He took another step forward, now fully committed to whatever it was that was unfolding. "What's going to happen? What have I unleashed?" The Apache woman's eyes flicked open, her dark gaze locking onto his. Her stare was intense, almost piercing, as though she could see straight through him. "The curse," she said, her voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "The curse that has plagued this land for centuries. It's not something you can just ignore. It's not something you can fight. It's a part of this place, of this history. And now you've awakened it." The rancher's heart raced. "A curse? You've got to be kidding me. I've heard all the ghost stories, the haunted land, the cursed soil. But I don't believe in any of that nonsense. This is real, isn't it?" He took another step closer, his hands clenched into fists, his voice rising with frustration. "This isn't some ancient story. There's something out there, isn't there?" The Apache woman didn't respond immediately. She just stared at him, her expression a mix of sorrow and knowing. And then, as though giving in to the inevitable, she nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "There's something out there, and it's coming." The rancher's eyes darted back to the shadow, which was now much closer, its shape becoming more solid, more defined. It was not human, nor was it an animal. It was a figure, a dark, twisted figure, something that seemed to defy the natural order of the world. The air around it shimmered, and the ground beneath it seemed to crack and split open as it moved forward. "Who is that?" the rancher demanded, his voice rising. "What is that?" The woman closed her eyes again, her expression one of deep resignation. "That," she said, her voice barely audible, "is the spirit of vengeance. It is the soul of those who were wronged, trapped in this place long ago. It was bound to the land, sealed by a pact made by my ancestors. But you—" She paused and her voice hardened. "You've broken that seal." The rancher's mind raced, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a physical force. He didn't believe in spirits or curses, but the sight before him, the unnatural figure advancing across the desert, the crackling energy in the air was enough to shake even his most hardened beliefs. His stomach churned as the shadow drew closer. "I don't know what you expect me to do," he said, his voice tight with panic. "I didn't mean to break anything. I just wanted to—" "To what?" She cut him off, her voice sharp. "To take from this land? To tame it? To claim it as your own? You think you can own what isn't yours? That you can control the spirits of this place? You're nothing but a trespasser. And now you'll pay the price." The rancher recoiled as if struck by a blow. Her words stung, not just because of the anger in them, but because they were true in a way he hadn't fully understood until now. He had come to this land to build a life, to claim a piece of it for himself, but he had never truly understood the power of the earth, of the spirits that dwelled beneath the surface, watching, waiting. He turned back to the shadow. The figure was closer now, so close he could almost see its features, if it had any. It was dark, amorphous, a shape that seemed to waver and pulse with an unnatural energy. The ground beneath its feet seemed to writhe and twist, and a low, guttural sound echoed from deep within the earth, a sound that set the rancher's teeth on edge. The Apache woman's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried across the vast emptiness of the desert. "You cannot fight it," she said. "You cannot kill what has no form. What you have seen is not of this world. It is the spirit of vengeance, and it will not rest until it has claimed what it is owed." The rancher's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. He had no idea what to do. He had no weapon, no knowledge of how to fight something that was not truly alive. His mind grasped at straws, but there was nothing tangible to hold on to. As the shadow drew nearer, the air around him thickened, the temperature dropping as if the very essence of life was being drained away. He could hear the woman's voice again, quieter now, as if she were fading into the background, her words seeping into his consciousness like the desert sand itself. "Leave now," she said, her tone resigned. "Leave before it is too late." But the rancher stood frozen, his gaze locked on the darkness, knowing in his gut that there was no running from it now. The curse was real, and the spirit was coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it.